Hey guys, my name is Colton and I'm the audio director here at Victory Family Church. Today we're going to be talking about our Avioms, which are the personal mixers we use for our in-ear monitors when we're on stage. In this video, I'm going to be talking about all of the specific knobs and buttons and all of the tools we have available on the Avioms to adjust our mix. I'm going to kind of talk about what they are and what they do, and in a later video, I will talk about how to actually build a good sounding in-ear mix. So if you're brand new to the worship team, this is going to be great for you to get an idea of how you can use these and what all the different buttons do. If you've been on the team for a while and you're familiar with the Avioms, this will still be a really good refresher. And you might learn a thing or two. There might be a few tips and tricks in this video, so definitely stick around. It's important to note that when you're watching this, you need to be listening on some decent headphones. Ideally, just go ahead and listen to this with your in-ear monitors that you use on stage. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with this row of buttons down here. These are our channel select buttons. And so with these, we can select different channels that are labeled right here. The labels will be different depending on which campus you're at, but we have 16 on all of our Avioms. All the Avioms are the same. So you can select these, and you'll see these parameters up here change, and we'll talk about that. But how this works is you select the channel you want to adjust, and then you would make your adjustments on that specific channel. We also have this miscellaneous button over here, which I will note has this profile select. Just always leave this on A. We never use B, so don't worry about changing it to B. It'll just kind of mess things up. We also have this Ambience button up here, which is really similar to one of these channel select buttons, but it's a little bit more limited, and we will definitely talk about it later. A lot of these channels are self-explanatory, like drums and bass and piano, but some of them might be a little bit less clear, and they might change campus to campus, but I'll talk about a few and what is usually in those channels. So click and tracks are pretty self-explanatory. The click is the click count that keeps us on beat, and then the tracks are the actual instrument parts in the tracks. In the MD channel, this is a little tricky because this will be our MD mic as well as the guide that comes from the tracks. So the MD, the person who's calling out, hey, we're going to the chorus, and then also the guide from the tracks, which is what's going to be like chorus 2, 3, 4. Both of those channels come into this MD channel. So when you turn this up or down, it'll adjust both. The aux channel is typically something we will have if we have an extra instrument, like if we had a cello or we had an extra guitar we don't normally have a channel for, we can use aux for that. And then miscellaneous is typically used for our speaking mics, like the pastor's mic or the MC's mic and that sort of stuff. So that's typically what we use aux and miscellaneous for. Let's go ahead and move on to the channel volume knob. This is also pretty simple. We can select a channel and then turn the volume up or down. Let's go ahead and take a listen, though, so we can see where our mix is at. So this is what our mix sounds like. Now, if we use this channel volume knob, we can select something like the click, and then turn it up, or turn it down. Same thing with the lead vocal here. Turn it down.
Pre-chorus.
So that should be pretty self-explanatory. Let's go ahead and move on to this tone knob. And this tone knob is kind of similar to the bass or the treble knobs in your car, but instead of having two, you just have one. So you can use this to make something sound brighter or sound darker. So let's take a look with Vox 2 really quick. So I can roll this knob up.
By the power of your Holy Ghost.
It'll sound brighter now. And then I can roll it back down.
It's blowing right now. Breaking my heart of stone, taking on.
And you heard when I rolled it down, it sounded kind of dark and muddy. So we'll use that in the video later where I talk about mixing on how we can adjust certain channels to certain instruments and stuff to make it sound better. But this knob right here will make something sound brighter or kind of sound more bassy. So that's how the tone knob works. Next, we have this reverb knob. And so we have reverb on each channel. So we'll listen to that really quick. So no reverb.
By the power of your Holy Ghost.
If I turn it up,
a new wind is blowing right now. Breaking.
So that'll kind of make it sound echoey and like it's in a really big room. And so we can use that to our advantage, but sometimes you can go crazy with it, so use it kind of modestly. But we'll talk about that more in the mix video as well. Next, we have our stereo placement knob or our pan knob. And so what we can do is we can actually pan this to the left or the right of our mix. So let's listen to that really quick. Using Vox 2 again. To the left. To the right. Back to the middle.
breaking my...
And there we go. That is panning. So we can go to the left or right, or we can put it in the middle, which is what we would call mono. One thing to note here, if I select certain channels like piano, for example, you'll see this orange light kicks on, and there's actually 2 dots. That's because these channels are what we call stereo channels. So there's a left and a right. It's not just one channel of audio, it's 2. And in this instance right now, we have the left all the way to the left and the right all the way to the right. And we can control that by hitting this spread knob. And so we can make this go mono, or we can use this to pan left or right, pan the left out to the left and the right out to the right at the same time. And so we can only do that with stereo channels, and I highly advise you do that with stereo channels, but I'll talk a lot more about that in the mix video later on. So those are all of our individual channel controls. Oh, I almost forgot, the ambience mic. This one basically has an on or off feature, so you can turn the ambience mic on or you can turn it off. And then to control the volume, you just hold it down and adjust the volume. And so that's kind of dependent on where you're at, but these are usually either some crowd mics that are pointing out into the auditorium, or it's actually this little mic right here. You can see this little hole. That's a microphone. And so you can use that to turn it up or down so you can kind of hear more of what's around you. But I'll talk more about that in the mix video. Moving on, we have these buttons over here, which this is kind of going to start the parts of the video where we talk about things that we just don't use, so you really don't need to be familiar with what they are. So these bottom 2 buttons, this recall and this group, just ignore them. They aren't very helpful for the way we use the Aviom, so just don't worry about it. But this top button is a solo, which is really helpful. What you can do with that is you can select it. It'll start flashing. And now when I hit play on these tracks here, you'll only hear the channel I have selected.
Going right now.
So that's really helpful, for example, if there's like a buzz or something in a channel and you're trying to figure out which one it is so you can turn it down. You can hit solo and then you can go through each channel until you find what you're looking for. There's also a mute functionality here, which that lets you, basically you can select a channel and then hit mute, and you'll see this little lights up here, and that just lets you know the channel's muted. You can typically accomplish the same thing by just turning the volume all the way down. But sometimes it's helpful if you want to mute a channel temporarily and then go right back to where the volume was at before. You can select click, for example, hit mute, and now you don't have click in your mix. And then when you want it back, you just select that channel again and then hit the mute button to unmute it. Pretty simple. Now there is one thing that's really, really important over here. Let's say our mix was just overall too loud and we wanted to turn all the channels down equally. There's these 2 buttons right here that in between, it might be hard to see, but it says trim all between these 2 buttons right here. If you press both of those at the same time, what you'll actually see is, I'm really quick, I'm just going to turn the click all the way up and Vox 2 all the way up. So you can see these are all the way up, they're at the very top. If I hit trim all, what's actually going to happen is it's going to bring that channel down some, but it's also going to bring every single other channel on the entire mixer down. So that'll help bring all of your channels down individually, and we might talk later about how that's helpful, but just know it's there, because if you ever run into that situation, it's a lot easier to click these 2 buttons than to go through every single channel and try to turn it down by 1 notch. Next, we have these buttons up here that you can just ignore. We don't use them. So up here, we have some of our main or our master controls. This first one says mono mix out. Once again, just ignore it. It doesn't do anything for the purposes of how we use the in-ears. So just ignore it. Then we have bass and treble, and these are exactly like what you would imagine a bass and treble knob like in a car stereo would be, but this affects your entire mix. So if I turn this bass knob up, you're going to hear that in the entire mix. If I turn this treble knob up or down, you're going to hear that in the entire mix. So a lot of times you can use this to kind of correct for your in-ears. So let's say your in-ears are just kind of boomy and bass heavy, you could roll this bass knob down, or if they kind of sound a little thin, you could roll it up. If your in-ears kind of sound a little dull sounding, you could turn this treble up to kind of bring some excitement in there. This enhance knob, be a little careful. It sounds, enhance sounds good, so you'd be like, enhance it all the way. That makes sense. But what this does is it applies some EQ correction to the mix to generally kind of provide some clarity. I like to turn it up a little bit, but don't go crazy with it. We'll listen to it really quick. So I'll start with it all the way down.
Everything's possible,
and I'll start turning it up
by the power of your Holy Ghost. A new wind is blowing right now.
So a little bit of it can be very, very helpful, but too much can start to make your in-ear mix sound really harsh and just kind of not very balanced. So use it a little bit to kind of provide some clarity, but don't go crazy. And then this master volume is the last thing we'll talk about. And what this controls is the master volume, the main like level of the output for this right here. So if you're using headphones plugged into the Aviom, you'll want to use this master volume knob. If you're using a wireless pack though, this will actually do absolutely nothing. So instead, use the volume that's on like your actual wireless pack. So that should be it. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me or someone else on the worship staff, and we will make sure to get that question answered. And make sure and also watch the next video, which is going to be about how to get a good sounding in-ear mix on the Avioms. So I'll see you then.